Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be doing a new series which is called Building Budget Gaming PCs for a Profit. Today will be Season 1, Episode 1. Let's get right into it. Starting with this build we scored from Facebook Marketplace for $80. It has an i5 6400 with 8GB of RAM, clocked at 2400 MHz with 250GB storage, a Corsair CX430 power supply. Starting by removing everything from the case, moving onto the GPU, deassembling the GPU, getting it ready for cleaning process. Now we went outside, we're starting with the motherboard, using a blower to blow off all the dust, getting as much as I can before we perform the deep cleaning process. Moving on to the graphics card, by using the blower, it enables me to blow any sort of dust that may be stuck on the surface with the assist of the brush, cleaning out the GPU heatsink. As you can see how filthy it is. Also blowing it off with the blower, getting into every square inch. Getting onto the CPU cooler and the CPU heatsink, blowing as much dust as possible, preparing it for the deep clean process. Now onto the graphics card shroud, blowing as much as we can, preparing it for the washing process. Right now, just removing all the dust and the rest will be dealt with water. Going onto the power supply, starting with the PSU fan, attempting to get every piece of dust possible, prepping it for the detail process. Also giving the power supply cover a short blow off, and finally bringing in the heart of the PSU. As you can see how much dust has been coming out. Bear in mind this power supply has never been cleansed since it's been bought, since it still had its warranty sticker. Finally, the last part we have to blow off are the graphics card fan. Right now we're blowing off between the blades, trying to get as much as we can, getting ready for the deep clean process. Now we came back, we blew off all the major dust. Now we will be getting into detailing them. Now we're going on to the deep cleaning part. So we got a soft bristle toothbrush, which will get into the small crevices of small areas. And we've got a microfiber cloth for the big surface areas, like a flat surface, where we just clean off the dust and everything. For the electronics, we'll be using isopropyl alcohol. There's no water based in here. It's like little to none. This is a 99.9%, which will be find at Bunnings for about $14. And yeah, we'll just be using glass cleaner for the rest, since I didn't have anything else, but it won't be affecting anything. Firstly, starting with the motherboard, bringing it in, giving a few sprays here and there with the brush, as explained in the previous clip. Also getting into all the small areas with the brush, where the blower couldn't get to. Next we got the graphics card, spraying a small amount in the required areas, using the brush gently to get through every square inch of the board. Flipping it to the back side, applying what we did to the front to the back. Now onto the power supply fan, putting some spray on my cloth, wiping everywhere in detail, making sure I'm not missing a spot, including the blades, making sure both the top and the bottom is clean. As you can see, the CPU cooler has been cleaned pretty well from the blower. So for this one, we will be washing it in water. So I'll wash this. This one also will be washing. The heat sink will be washed as well. The heat sink for the CPU cooler will be washed as well. And yeah, that's about it. This one's will be washed in water and soap. Don't worry, it won't rust if you blow off the water like what we did before with the dust. Just blow out the water, let it sit on top of like a rag or something. And yeah, it will dry within 10-15 minutes. So now moving on to building up the parts once again to its original state. Let's get into it. Starting with the first GPU fan, lining up with the holes and screwing them down. Bringing in the second fan, lining up and screwing that down too. Organizing the wires in the shroud, preventing the wires getting caught up in the fans. Now bringing in the GPU heatsink. As you can see, we're trying to line it up with the shroud so we can screw it down. As you can see, it clipped in right into place. Bringing in the graphics card board, placing the thermal pads, applying fresh thermal paste, placing the fan cable to the board, lining up both appropriate screw holes. Now we are on the final stretch. Next thing, we are starting with the power supply. Now bringing in the power supply fan with the power supply cover, lining it up to the appropriate screw holes, screwing all 4 screws once all aligned. Now inserting the fan cable, sliding them into each other, screwing down the final screws. Onto assembling the CPU cooler, bringing in the fan and the heatsink. Now bringing in the motherboard, opening the CPU socket, placing in the CPU, queuing the CPU, inserting the original 8GB stick, and including the 8GB stick I had on hand. Bringing in the SSD standoffs, placing the SSD in the motherboard, applying fresh thermal paste. Now onto the final part for the motherboard, bringing in the CPU cooler, placing the CPU cooler on top of the CPU, and finally for the motherboard, plugging in the PWM cable. Now that we assembled the parts, time to introduce you to the case that's going to be with this build. It is a Thermaltake View 170 ARGB in the black color. Starting by placing the I/O shield, making sure it clicked all in place, bringing in the platform, make sure it lines up and is screwed down. Now bringing in the power supply, lining up the holes so we can screw it in. Passing through the wires in appropriate location to ensure organization. Right now I decided to tape it up with black duct tape to get rid of the ketchup and mustard cables for an aesthetic pleasing look. Plugging all the wires including non-vital cables into the motherboard. Passing the ARGB fan, PWM and ARGB connector to the back. Now bringing all the PWM and ARGB cables. Plugging them all into the ARGB hub that we did buy separately. Now you can see I'm taping the back of the case, so when you can see from the front, you won't be able to see any of the cables from the back. Now I am tidying up all the cables, putting zip ties, putting them in appropriate locations, and all unnecessary cables out of the way. Now introducing the graphics card of the build that we have detailed and reassembled. It is an RX 570, 4GB of VRAM. Now bringing in the graphics card, lining it up with the motherboard and clicking it right in. Also screwing it down to the case. Plugging in the 8-pin connector to supply power to the GPU. Tipping the build on its side, unscrewing the hard drive bay, removing it from its place. We will be installing this 1TB drive as additional storage, screwing the hard drive into place, screwing it back into the case, bringing the build back upright, closing off the back panel since we don't need it anymore, screwing the back panel back on, and finally, after all that hard work, the build is complete. You may be asking yourself, how much did the build really cost after all those upgrades and the deal from Facebook Marketplace, and also the full spec list will be displayed on screen. Now that the build is complete, you may be asking yourself, how does it perform in 2025 on AAA titles? Starting with Fortnite, the settings performance mode, all the settings on the lowest, and the 3D resolution to 70%. As you can see, it's running on an average 60 to 80 FPS. The second game that we'll be trialing is Valorant. Valorant running on the lower settings is performing between 150 to 160 FPS consistently. Please do keep in mind that these figures are not 100% accurate due to having softwares in the background running while playing, such as OBS and MSI Afterburner. So finally, the final game we'll be testing will be GTA 5. As displayed on the top left, on average this PC is performing about 70 FPS to 100 FPS. So throughout the whole process of benchmarking these PCs, in all 3 games we were using OBS and MSI Afterburner, which has definitely impacted the FPS numbers. So overall, the games without these softwares will be performing way better than they did in this video. We will be buying capture card very soon and be reviewing it on the channel in order to show 100% accurate figures. If you did enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. Please comment any suggestions, any feedback, or anything you might be thinking. I will be reading every single comment.